In the meantime here, we do want to bring into the conversation, of course, our friend, legal analyst, Neama Rahmani, who's been guiding us through this trial each and every day, and he joins me. Neama, good to see you yet again. All right, day one of jury deliberations are over. What was there to glean from how they deliberated today? They made it about 3.5 hours, and then kind of out of nowhere, there was a note passed to the judge. They wanted to revisit some of the testimony from one, David Pecker, and two, Michael Cohen, about this meeting that took place in Trump Tower in January of 2017, and then a second note where they wanted some of the jury instructions reread to them as well. Is this standard fare for a jury, or should we be reading something else into this? Can you decipher the tea leaves at all with how the jury's feeling based on these two notes today, or not?
It is standard, Andrew, but there is some reading of the tea leaves, and this is my reading. Obviously, Michael Cohen's testimony, I don't think, is particularly helpful for the prosecution, but it's really those three questions about David Pecker, that readback, that I want to focus on. And I think it's helpful for the prosecution. This is why. Let's not forget that the state called Pecker as their very first witness. They thought he was the most helpful. Even though he's an alleged co-conspirator, prosecutors always want to start strong and end strong. So when we're talking about someone that is really tying Donald Trump directly to these catch and kill stories, first, the story about his alleged illegitimate child and the doorman of his building. Then, of course, Karen McDougal, the former Playboy playmate, and that affair and the payment, and that was caught on tape. There was the recording. And then, of course, Stormy Daniels. Pecker was less involved in that particular story. But ultimately, I think he is a key prosecution witness. So the fact that jurors are asking for a readback leads me to guess and to speculate that there are at least some jurors who are convinced of Donald Trump's guilt. They are voting to convict, and they're trying to use that testimony to convince undecided or holdout jurors.
So, Neama, is that how this works? If you have a majority of the 12 jurors in agreement and you have a minority of them in disagreement, does the majority have to persuade and convince the minority in that room? Is that what happens in any jury deliberation?
Yes, in a criminal case, because the verdict has to be unanimous.
Sure.
Of course, there's different rules that apply in civil cases, but in any criminal case in this country, with very few exceptions, it has to be a 12 out of 12 unanimous jury. So when you're hearing or seeing evidence or readback that is favorable to one side over the other, that leads me to believe that it's being used to convince those holdout jurors, because again, that all has to happen in that jury deliberation room. It has to be unanimous. It has to be 12-0. And the longer this process drags on, we're only day one, that inures to the benefit of Donald Trump and raises the possibility that we might get a hung jury and a mistrial.
Oh, wow. So who leads that effort amongst the jury members? The foreperson, the juror that was picked the first? Is that how it goes?
It can be the foreperson, but usually there are one or two strong voices in that jury deliberation room. And I'm also just speculating, Andrew, that it's those two lawyers in there, jurors number 3 and 7, that are leading the deliberations here. Whoever has those two jurors on their side, I think, has a significant advantage here. Even though they're supposed to leave their legal knowledge and judge the case solely based on the facts and the law in this case, as read to them by Judge Juan Merchan, it's clear that lawyers tend to lead these types of deliberations, and the lay jurors, the ones that don't have that legal experience, will defer to them in terms of guiding the discussion. I think one really important...
Sure, go ahead.
I think one other really important point that came out today was really the jury instructions. So the fact that we're having some of them read back is important. There were several important developments that came out of today's jury instructions. Sometimes people sleep on the instructions. They're not that interesting. But really, we learned 3 very important things today, Andrew, during the jury instructions that Judge Juan Merchan gave. And they were the following. First, we talked about a potential misdemeanor conviction.
Yeah.
But Judge Juan Merchan did not give a lesser included instruction. That means I think it's an all or nothing situation here.
Wow.
Either Donald Trump will be convicted of felonies, he'll be acquitted, or it's going to be a hung jury. There's no opportunity for the jurors to find that the business records were false, but they were not in furtherance of or to cover up another crime, at least not according to my read of the jury instructions. Now, I think the reason for that is the statute of limitations is run on the misdemeanor counts, or the parties made a strategic decision not to ask for a lesser included. So it could go to the benefit of either side, but I don't think the jurors will have the option to return a guilty verdict on just misdemeanors. So they're going to have to find, if they're going to convict, that the false business records were in furtherance of or to cover up another crime.
Yeah,
now, with respect to that element, Judge Juan Merchan made two very important rulings today. First, he said the verdict has to be unanimous, but the jurors don't have to agree on what other crime was covered up or furthered. This is something Donald Trump even tweeted about. He was really upset. So if the jurors find the business records were false and they covered up or furthered some other crime, that's enough. And Judge Juan Merchan also made another very important ruling with respect to that other crime. He said that other crime could be election fraud, can be a campaign finance violation. Those we already knew about. But he said it can also be a tax crime.
Yeah.
I think that's important, Andrew, because we've talked about it. The argument that the prosecution has made with respect to election fraud and campaign finance violations, they're convoluted, they're fairly weak in my opinion. But I think the tax crime argument is a lot stronger, because I think even lay people can understand that if you write off something that you shouldn't unlawfully, it's an unlawful write-off. That's a tax crime. So I think that particular instruction was very good for the prosecution this morning.
Yeah, because it's so interesting. You and I discussed yesterday. I had asked you, could he just be convicted on the 34 counts misdemeanors only? And you seem to not think so. This three options, so to speak, when you have the furtherance of another crime or to conceal a crime. Federal campaign violation 1, creation of additional false records 2, tax law violation 3. To your point, the jury instructions state the jury does not have to unanimously agree with each other on which of those three unlawful activities Trump intended to do. The jury does have to be unanimous that Trump intended to do at least one of them. I mean, that seems very novel, very creative. That seems very technical. And so, whatever Juan Merchan, the judge, is doing here, those are complicated jury instructions. What's also complicated, I think, Neama, lastly, I know you have to go at the top of the hour, is that, they're requesting to revisit some of this testimony. And apparently this is a New York rule, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can't just take the transcript back into the room and read it. The judge has to read out the testimony to the jury in the courtroom. Is that right?
That is right, and that's typical in courtrooms across the country. Oftentimes, the court reporter will come back, or the clerk, and they will read the transcript. Now, anything that's been stricken from the record, any objection that has been overruled, some of those are removed, but that readback happens in open court. They don't get the transcript back there. This is something that is really par for the course, not just in New York and other states, and in our federal system as well.
So it seems like, and just lastly, that this is, going to maybe go on longer than we had anticipated, because if there are more notes and the deliberations about the notes come very late into the deliberation of the day, it kind of bleeds into the next day. And so if there are more notes, we could expect a similar time frame here. Do I have that right? Is that what you're tracking to? That this could be long and drawn out?
That is right. Anytime there's a readback, it's not simple. The parties get together, they discuss the readback with the judge, make sure that they agree that anything inappropriate is not read back to the jury. That's why Judge Juan Merchan said, you have to be in the courthouse. You cannot leave, because it takes everyone to be reassembled. You got to bring the jurors back. It was unable to happen today, so it's not going to happen until tomorrow morning. So it does tend to drag things on whenever there's a request like this.
All right, Neama Rahmani, I can't thank you enough. Great insight as always. We'll talk tomorrow. Thanks, Neama.
Thanks, Andrew. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right, in the meantime here, we do want to let you listen into former President Trump.